You are listening to Travel is Cheaper Than Divorce. This podcast is for all those who may be struggling with their spouse or their children and the relationship with them. We help give you tips and tricks by using travel as the means to be able to help your relationships with your family. I will provide those tricks and other ways to help travel with little or no cost. So let's get into it. One of the things that travel has helped me do for my family is it's really helped my family to get a better education, my kids, and even my spouse and I. There is a real problem, most people would agree, with the education system in the United States, in this country. And everybody says it, but nobody ever really wants to do anything about it. Really, it's hard to get a solution that is to the liking of everyone. But they keep using it. They keep thinking that right there is the goal. Is to get them through school, and they can't miss a day of school. Heaven forbid they miss a week of school. Heaven forbid they miss 10 days of school. My friends, one of the things that I have learned over the years, and it's not hard, you can do a simple Google search and know this, that the most expensive travel times of the year is during the summer. Why? Why? Because it's warm? Sure, I guess. San Diego is warm all year, so in Florida. I mean, what warm? You can go a lot of places that are warm. Some of the places that are really beautiful during the winter. It's not about the warmth, it's about the education schedule of your children. That's why it's more expensive during the summer. That's why it's more expensive during the weeks between Christmas and New Year's. That's why it's more expensive during spring break. It's everything. Everybody's travel schedule seems to rotate around their kids' school schedule. I'm telling you that that's not the way to travel right now. That is not the way to travel. There are exceptions to this rule, of course, but let me tell you a story about something that our family did. So first of all, almost all of our family travel is not in the summer. It's not. I don't worry about taking my kids out of school for 3 days, 4 days, 7 days, 10 days. Some people might think that's crazy. That's fine. That's just how we feel as a family, because we believe they get a better education with us on a vacation, even if it's on the beach, than they do inside the classroom. Because if we go back to what's really important, right? We talked about in earlier episodes about how memories are more important than stuff. Love is the most important thing in the world. I've said that a lot. What are they going to get in the class? Are they going to get love in the classroom? Guys, really? It's important for your family to stay together. That's the point of this podcast, really. I'm just teaching an alternative way to do it. So here's what we did. One of our Christmas vacations I talked about was our vacation to Washington, D.C. My kids learned more on that trip than they would have in a history classroom during those same 10 days. And they developed a love for the country, but they learned more than that. Because we took these kids to a bunch of places in Washington, D.C., but one of the places we took them was the Holocaust Museum. For those who haven't been there, there is a room inside the Holocaust Museum where it's just full of shoes. This room, these shoes were worn by the people that were killed in Auschwitz. I believe it was Auschwitz, or it might be all of them, but it's a room full of shoes of victims. It is said that if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. This is only one of the history trips we've been on. In fact, another thing we'd tell our kids, and much to the chagrin of them, is that every other Christmas trip, so every other year, we do a trip that is focused on education. Because we do believe the education is extremely important. We just don't believe education in the way that is currently done is as important as education going out and seeing these things. There's another educational trip that our family went on. That my oldest child, because of that trip, and it was an educational one, we've literally never been closer. But I'm going to do a whole episode on that on a later date, probably. But when you're sitting around the actual sites, the places where things happened, when you're able to look behind the glass at the actual Constitution, the actual Declaration of Independence, when you're able to tour the halls of Congress before they closed that down after the January 7th event, then you get a better education there. And that's what my kids got. That's what my kids have received in the couple of educational trips that we've taken them on. These aren't short, generally speaking. We tried to give them as much of education as we can going through these things. And you might think, oh, my kids will be bored at these things. Not really. I mean, they do have to be age appropriate. You're not bringing a 3-year-old through the Holocaust Museum and expecting the 3-year-old to get it. But that doesn't mean you can't educate your 3-year-old in some other way. Plus, as I've said earlier, and I alluded to earlier, if you can travel in the quote off seasons, which means not in the summer, your prices are much better. In fact, I'm really trying to rack my brain while I'm sitting here and thinking about all the trips we've been on since we started traveling quite a bit. And I don't think many of them have been during the summer. It just doesn't make sense to me. Money-wise, or even points-wise, for me to take my family or even my spouse somewhere major during the summer. In fact, my next plan, don't tell my wife, is to take her to London. And I ain't doing that during the summer. First of all, it's hot there, but it's just more expensive. Everything's more expensive. So why do it? So there's 2 reasons. I'm sorry, let me back up. There's actually only one reason to do that, and then it's just simply cost. But the other, no, actually, there's 2 reasons. I was right the first time. The first is cost. But the second thing is you won't know this by this podcast maybe, but I'm an introvert. I don't really like I'm not the one that ever strikes up a conversation with people. I can carry a conversation very well once somebody strikes up one with me. And if I get to know you pretty well, I can joke around pretty well with you. But by nature, I'm an introvert. I'm the guy on the plane who will put on headphones pretty much right when he starts, right when he got on the airplane. I'm not the one, and I've seen this before, where you have an extrovert and they want to talk to everybody. My dad was like that. It used to drive me insane. My dad would talk to literally everybody. Still does, actually. That's a great skill to have. I don't have that skill, but he has that. And so being that way, you can imagine, I don't like to be around crowds. So that's the second reason, in my opinion, being an introvert, and maybe you are too, of why I don't like to travel in the summer. There are crowds everywhere. Again, there are exceptions to this rule. There are places like I want to visit in Canada, for example. I don't want to go to Canada in the winter. Who would, really? Unless you're skiing, I suppose. I'd rather go there in the summer. So there are exceptions to every rule. Everything I've said, there's an exception to a rule somewhere. This is generally what I have had in my experience. I don't like crowds, and it's cheaper. That's the 2 major reasons why I do not travel in the summer. But I was talking about the kids' education earlier because people get hung up so much on the fact that, oh, my kids are in school, I can't take them out of school. Bull. And in fact, let me tell you another story, because it's not that hard, guys. Because let me tell you the truth. I had this trip planned for my kids. It was a Christmas trip. They didn't know what the trip was, and I emailed and talked to. And again, you gotta realize my kids are in, high school and junior high and such, and so I had to email and talk to probably 14 to 16 teachers. And I called or emailed every single one of them to get work for them, or would they be okay, or what do they need to do to be okay as far as grade-wise? Because I know there are some people out there who are just stressed out as all get out if their kid doesn't get an A in that class. Then talk to the teachers. Your dollar stretches way farther with your kids, and you have a better experience, frankly, because there's not as many crowds. Even if you are an extrovert, you may not want to be around that many crowds, or maybe your spouse doesn't, or maybe your kids don't. Get with the teachers then. Plan the trip. Get with the teachers. What can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Now mine was a little difficult though, because I couldn't let my kids know that this was happening, because they didn't even know when the trip was. I not only did I plan the trip, they don't know where they're going, they didn't know when they were going. So so in this case, it was really hard for them, because normally they go, hey, you're going on a trip, in a week, so we're going to do a makeup now, but they couldn't even tell them now. I asked them not to. And they were very accommodating, we'll call it. They were very accommodating. So all you have to do is really just get with those teachers and say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. How can we work this out if you're really worried about that? And then give your kids a better education, in my opinion, than sitting in a classroom learning about things. Take them out of the classroom and show them things. That's what I did. My kids still talk about some of the things that they learned there. And it makes your heart glad that they're able to learn all of those things. So you get a double opportunity, right? You get to build memories with your children. And you also get to teach them something without actually having to teach them something. Nobody wants to listen to a lecture from mom and dad. But if they can see it, touch it, feel it, literally sometimes touch and feel it when it came to the monuments in D.C. and the other things that we visited, it's Mount Vernon in Virginia was a wonderful experience for my children. If they could do all of these things and do without the crowds, because another thing about crowds is they can't get as intimate of an experience if they're behind 500 other people rushing them to get along, go along, get out of the way. There's so many people who want to see this, get out of the way. What kind of an experience is that? And that has happened with a couple of my trips with my kids here or there. Get along, move along, come on, there's other people there. And we do want to be courteous to those people. So we do actually accommodate them. We don't want to be rude. But if you can get less crowds, then you don't have to worry about that. So here's what I would do. Last episode I talked, or one of the episodes earlier, I talked a lot about scheduling that trip now for your spouse and you. It's important. 100% believe in that. When you return from that trip, start looking at planning a trip with your children. And again, my recommendation to you, again, is that it's not done during the summer. And it's not done during Christmas break. And it's not done during spring break. It's just too busy. You think all these travel companies give you better deals on these weeks? Are you kidding me? It's just the exact opposite. They pump prices up because they know. They know there's too many parents in this country who believe that they can't take their kids out of school because it'll stunt them. Maybe in the pandemic way for like years, maybe stunt them, but a week, talk to their teachers. Talk to their teachers. So let me give you a step-by-step, very briefly. I already said this, but let me just make it easy on you. When you get back from your trip, you sit down with your spouse and you plan that family trip. Maybe it is a Christmas trip like we do as a family. It doesn't matter. But plan a trip. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 days because you can't afford it. Fine. Plan a trip with your kids this time. Once you have that planned, and if it's during the school year, next step, immediately start emailing or calling your teachers, their teachers, unless it's in the middle of the summer. Like if it's summer break at the time you can't get a hold of their teachers, but if it isn't, email or call their teachers immediately. And if it's during the summer, one of the first things that happens, and they say, well, what can we do for your child is what I seem to get from all these kids. Who say, well, there's the deal. We're going on a trip. I want to see what I can do for my child. Make sure they're not falling behind. That's your second step. Your third step is to book it. Because so far I've said get a date, talk to the teachers, then book it. The reason why I say don't book it don't book it before you talk to the teachers is sometimes you talk to teachers to find out they have a final, or it's the end of the semester, or whatever, then you might have to adjust your dates here or there. So pick a date first, then talk to the teachers if you're worried about that. And I say that if you're worried about that because me personally, I'm not worried about that. I don't care as much. On a long trip, like a 10-day trip, that's when I actually email them. But if it's like a 2 or 3 day trip, that doesn't bother me. If the kids are out 2 or 3 days, it doesn't bother me. I don't think they're going to be stunted. But talk to their teachers, then book that trip. You can use some of the fundamentals I taught in the earlier episode when it was just a couple trip. And again, there's other ways of booking travel with points. That's the system I keep talking about. The points and miles system to earn and spend properly those miles. Blow your mind. Blow your mind. Where you can travel in luxury as a family for little or no cost. So that's also another option. You start working on that as well. So that is my recommendation to you, or that's what I would do, because that's what I did do. You have been listening to Travel is Cheaper Than Divorce with me, your host, David Packer. Please connect with us on our YouTube channel at Travel Point Pros. There you will learn many tips and tricks on how to use points and miles to travel in luxury for little to no cost. Remember to like and subscribe and comment on any of the videos that you find helpful to you. Thank you for listening.